I don't think we need to hash out the power of humility, but I would say this, it goes back to what I said earlier, self-awareness. To me, so much of humility comes back to, as a leader, are you self-aware? And are you leading yourself? And a big part of self-leadership is self-awareness. And most leaders don't do the hard work of self-awareness.
Hey everybody, welcome to Pastor. I'm your host, Dave Stone. Thank you so much for being a part of this. We look forward to this every week. We drop a new episode every Tuesday. Thank you so much for being a part of this podcast. Share the word with others. You know, you might be tuning in from your car. You might be listening while you're doing some stuff around the house, or maybe you're lifting weights and having a workout, or maybe you're out on a run. Who knows? But thank you for being a part of this. If you don't already follow us on Instagram, you can go to Instagram and go to Pastor Podcast. And if you follow us, you can stay up with the reels that are coming out and a lot of different information, things that people have said in the past, and also some upcoming guests that will be in the future as well. You can also follow us on YouTube at the Focused Pastor channel. And you can click subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts, and that way you'll never miss one. Now, before we dive in, I want to tell you about something powerful that's happening. It's not too far away. It's October 20th through the 22nd. It's Focus on the Family's Pastor Couples Conference. It's 3 days designed for you. I was there last year. I'm going to get to speak this year. We're going to actually record a live podcast while we are there. I'm really excited about it. It's going to be a great time together. 2.5 days in beautiful Colorado Springs. Come with your spouse. Recharge, reconnect, be poured into, have great fellowship. It's going to be awesome. We'll even have an opportunity for you to sign up by going to thefocusedpastor.org, and you can register there or click the link that we'll put in our show notes. Well, what makes a leader worth following? It's not always charisma. It's not always the platform that they have. And according to today's guest, Brad Lomenick, it starts with something far more personal. It starts with that self-leadership piece and curiosity and a self-awareness, and also having a calling that's on your life. And Brad's journey has been anything but typical. He went from wrangling cattle to working under John Maxwell, the leadership guru of all time, to leading the Catalyst movement that has shaped a generation of ministry and marketplace leaders. He has a passion for young leaders. If you are in your 20s and 30s, you're going to be buckling your seatbelt because we've got an awesome interview today. For those of us who are a little older than that and are in our 40s, 50s, 60s, maybe even north of that, you're going to find out how it is that you can pour into younger leaders. Today, Brad unpacks for us what it really means to lead well and how it is to raise others up. I promise you're going to want to take notes on this and make certain that you can go back and share some of this with your church staff. So let's listen in on my conversation with Brad Lomenick. Brad Lomenick, there's a lot of places that you could be today. There's a lot of people you could be talking to. Thank you so much for joining us.
I'm honored, Dave. Listen, you're the OG, man. I'm just glad you finally got into the podcast game. Took you long enough.
I'm following my leader, and I enjoy your podcast. I love listening to it, H3 Leadership Podcast. I get a lot of good meat from it and things that I can use. I probably have dropped some of those nuggets even in the midst of Pastor to Pastor on these podcasts. You have a great background. You have a different background. I just shared a little bit about it in the introduction, but let's go back to the start, because here you are being used in ministry, very much so. You spend more time with pastors than most pastors do, and yet you've had an unusual path in the way you've served the Lord. So take us back to how it started. You went to Oklahoma. What was your degree that you had there?
Well, a history degree, so pretty much worthless. I don't know anybody using a history degree unless they're teaching. I was thinking that I would probably go into education because I have a long line of administrators and educators and coaches in my family. But I always felt a nudge towards leadership. I just didn't know what that meant. I was always the kid that was stepping out and running for office and captain of the sports teams and but I grew up in the church. So it's sort of this idea of, well, can I be a pastor or a politician? Those are the two options I thought were probably the most potential, and then also a teacher or administrator. But then I got out of Oklahoma and went to this guest ranch in Colorado called Lost Valley. And that for me really changed the direction of my life, meaning that I got connected to some people then through that then allowed me to start working for John Maxwell. And then I got on the leadership path and started doing events. So, for me, there was not a grand plan. And I hope nobody's disappointed, but I think that's true for most of us.
What was your title? You were there from 21 to 25 on that ranch. What was the title that you got up to?
Well, I was head wrangler. So when you're working on a guest ranch in the middle of the mountains of Colorado with potentially 100 guests a week, sometimes in the summer, 130 horses, 250 head of cattle, you better know what you're doing. Now, this is what's been true about my journey of my life, probably true for you too. I had no clue. And I learned it literally. I mean, I remember being the head wrangler and sort of looking around going, does anybody else know what to do in this situation? Like, I don't have the answer. And, I figured it out. I was smart. I was resilient. Had capacity. But it, for me, it was such a great experience. It wasn't what I majored in, but it was the first step for me of figuring out what I feel like was the sense of calling on my life, to be a gatherer of leaders, convener of leaders, somebody who's around people of influence. And that was what was true about the guests who were coming, is all the guests that were showing up there were captains of industry.
That's amazing to think that your gathering skills, which we'll probably talk about a little bit later, and your connecting skills, that you sharpened some of those ages 21 to 25. And that was so important. And then somehow, how did you end up working for John Maxwell from being at a guest ranch and working with horses and cattle? That's an unusual transition and segue.
Well, I tell you, the one skill I left from Lost Valley with that probably stands out the most is being able to scoop poop. I scooped millions. I mean, I don't know if it was millions, but hundreds of thousands of horse manure trails. Here's the thing, Dave, is I got connected to a couple of guys who came out and did some work for us at Lost Valley. And I was part of the team leading, helping lead the ranch. And there was a family that was running it. They were going through some transition, succession planning. Does the next generation of their family take over this place? Some management consultants came out, and I met them, and they were the first. They weren't the first, but they were the first expression for me in my career life of seeing somebody walk around with scriptures in one hand and the Harvard Business Review or the Wall Street Journal in the other. And I just was so attracted to these guys. And I said, hey, can I come work for you when I leave here? I don't know when I'm leaving, and they thought that was cute. It was like, oh, you're a head wrangler. What do you know about management consulting? But I talked them into it when I left. When I finally decided to leave, I started doing work for them. About a year in, one of our clients was John Maxwell's organization. So I got connected to John's team and organization and leadership through doing some consulting. Again, I had no clue. I didn't know anything about management consulting. I knew very little about team dynamics, organizational leadership, but I just kept following the breadcrumbs. And then I ended up joining John's team after about a year of doing some consulting work. And then for me, the rest was history. So that was, again, my mid to late 20s when I found that space. And I think this is important for young leaders and those who are trying to help young leaders navigate career decisions or the next step decisions in their career journey, is get around the right who, and things will take care of themselves. The what question, for me anyway, I wasn't asking the right what question, because my what question was, I guess, politics or pastoring or maybe being a teacher, which are fine answers. But for me, the who question, in terms of getting around the right people at Lost Valley, getting around the right people to get connected to John Maxwell, that was the helpful antidote to, I think, so much anxiety for 20-somethings today, trying to figure out what am I supposed to do with my life.
So what do you say to the 25, 28-year-old that's listening to this podcast? It's a Christian leader. And how do you help them get around the who's that can actually make an impact on them when it comes to character, the craft of preaching or ministry, whatever particular area they might be in? What do you say to that person that's in their late 20s?
Well, I would say, first of all, you have to be intentional about reaching out to these people and or either first of all, identifying them. If a 20 something doesn't have a sense of who comes to mind when you think about sort of what the career arc might look like for you. And that doesn't have to be the right answer, but in terms of those who are ahead of you, do you have anybody that you look at and go, I just like to be around them and learn from them? So that's step one. Step two is then intentionality of reaching out to them. And here's the thing, you might have to go work for them for free. You might actually have to be an intern. You might have to go down to get up in your career arc, right? You might have to say, hey, I'm just going to go figure out a way to be around them, carry their bags, be in their presence. And if you work hard, if you're a hustler, if you're willing to do the hard work, maybe for 6 months or a year or perhaps more, I can promise you they will give you opportunities. And it may not be the right career decision for you. But I would say this too, as a follower of Jesus, I'm also making decisions. I mean, for me, Dave, Bob Foster, which nobody knows that name, but Bob Foster, who was the founder of Lost Valley. And when I was 22, 23, 24, he was 72, 73, 74, 50 years ahead of me. And every Friday morning, he's mentoring me over breakfast. And we're doing scripture memory. I mean, the foundational pieces for me spiritually in my 20s were shaped at Lost Valley Ranch. So I didn't know that going in though, but I got around the right who at that point in my life, and it was a game changer.
You share that, and I think we can all think of a Bob Foster. As you're saying that, we got a picture in our mind, and our mind goes to someone that took an interest in us, maybe that we reached out to and just said, hey, can I get together? And I've heard Ashley Wooldridge say, sometimes we ask too much. So we might say to someone that we want to be mentored by, we might say something to the effect of, hey, here's a situation where I'd like to be mentored by you, by maybe getting together with you 5 times a year, 6 times a year, or every Friday. And he said, don't ask that. He said, just say, can we get together 2 or 3 times a year to go to lunch? And I will always come prepared, and I will have 3 or 4 questions, and that's what I'll want to dig into with you.
I love that.
I love that concept of here's a guy who pours into someone in their 20s. So if you're listening and you're in your 60s or 70s, I'm 64. As you're listening to this thing, okay, who can I reach out to who's in their 20s or 30s? And if you're in your 20s or 30s, you say, who can I look up to that's in their 50s or 60s or whatever it might be, and glean and learn some things from them.
Yes. And I would say this too, just to add to that. I amen everything you're saying. Look for local people too, or people who are available. And this is the downside of so many young leaders who have aspirations. They're ambitious. They want to change the world. Is they're texting you or me and going, hey, how do I get mentored by Brandon Lake? I want to be a worship leader. How do I get mentored by Kyle Alderman or Louis Giglio or Ashley Woolridge? I want to be a pastor. Now that's it. I love your spirit, but also be realistic. And there are lots of people locally in your circle of influence already that are more than willing to mentor you, help you, be an advisor for you. So I love your aspiration, but also be willing to look locally, because that's where you're probably going to find the most help. And also just somebody who's a step ahead of you. I mean, Bob Foster for me was 4 steps ahead of me in terms of life and experience and age, but many times just a step ahead of you. So if you're 21, a 31-year-old can be as helpful as a 71-year-old can be.
Yeah. Yeah. Great takeaways there. Thanks so much for sharing on that. Let's change gears. Let's talk about that next chapter of your life. You find yourself going to Catalyst Conference for Christian leaders. And on top of that, just being a part of that process. And after just a few years, all of a sudden you find yourself leading Catalyst, this thriving program that is reaching young Christian leaders in a different way than's ever taken place before. What was that like for you? And what were some of your favorite takeaways from your times of leadership there?
Well, again, the story of my life, I don't know what I'm doing when I step into new seasons of leadership. I mean, I showed up.
Don't we all? I feel like we're always in over our head. I've felt that way with every stinking job I've ever had. I always feel like, oh man, I'm in over my head. I wonder if people will ever find out.
Yes.
And there's this sense of, I don't want to say pretending or of wearing a mask, but fake it till you make it in some ways. And so, yeah, I can relate to that. Sorry to interrupt, but I relate.
Listen, this is also the new era of leadership, which is people already know. They already know that you don't know what you're doing. Now, here's the difference. I can be vulnerable and authentic and transparent, and I can now create congruency between them not knowing or them knowing and me knowing. That's the definition of self-awareness or team awareness. What it doesn't say though is I don't get to say, well, I'm just going to stay here and I'm going to be clueless. But there are times when people are looking at us as leaders and going, bro, we already know that you don't have the answer. And now we're looking at our leaders just saying, will you please connect the dots that we're aware that hopefully you're aware. So that's just a sidebar on the power of, I would say, transparency and vulnerability today as a leader, compared to what you said, Dave, which was the old days. We would have never told anybody that we didn't know what we were doing. We would have faked it. We would have figured it out. We would have tried to prove. So back to your question of Catalyst, I stepped in. I was helping on events with John Maxwell's organization, with a bunch of larger simulcast events and different expressions, different conferences. But Catalyst, because it started to get some momentum, and I was helping on it, but I wasn't leading it. And then all of a sudden, because of some changes in leadership and ultimately like looking around going, well, somebody needs to lead this thing. So I do. And I would say for me, it quickly was reality of, man, I better figure out what I'm doing. But also I did feel like it was now a real sense for me of an assignment that was truly reflecting my calling. And that was that was validation, but it was also like, oh man, I can run with this for several years here and feel like I'm on purpose and I'm moving in the right direction. And it wasn't that the other things I had done up to that point weren't, but all of a sudden, like, I just felt this sense of, okay, this is the sweet spot for me, where talent, passion, gifts, God's story, and a sense of sustainability or a job, all those things came together and gave me the runway for a decade of feeling like I was truly making a difference and having an impact.
And what was your goal, or what was the mission statement for Catalyst? Because, I mean, man, you guys had a huge impact. Succinctly, what would that have been?
Well, it was to gather young leaders, primarily those under 40, and to try to both convene them as well as inspire them and to give a new sense of community to that generation. And we had all been, again, because of John Maxwell's legacy, he had been doing pastor conferences, but all of us who were in our 20s at the time, we felt like we wanted to gather our friends and start to create something that was different for a new generation. And so if you showed up, it was really designed for that younger leader in their 20s and 30s. But it was still doing conferences, but we were trying to bring an experiential element to it. There was a combination of fun, of what I would say really, really powerful times of worship, corporate worship in bigger arenas, and also great teaching from some of the best leadership voices in America. both in the Christian space as well as even those who weren't necessarily believers. We wanted to be innovative as well and try to push the envelope and not to be controversial, but to try to what we felt like was create something new. And I think we did that for 20 years.
And it was one of those things where I think in a conference, you can do some things that you can't do in the church world. For instance, some of the speakers that you would have sometimes were far from faith, but you also saw that as an opportunity to, in a sense, show them what Christianity is all about.
Yes.
Which I think is such a great takeaway for every Christian leader. We have a lot of people who are not pastors who listen to this, but they're deeply involved in their church. And I don't ever want us to lose sight of the fact that, man, we are to be that fragrance of Christ. And our spirit should be so winsome because of Jesus and the Holy Spirit living inside of us, that people are attracted to it. I'm thinking about some of the guests that I know you've had. Rainn Wilson, that plays Dwight on The Office.
Yeah.
Yeah, you had him, didn't you?
We did. We had him. We had Jack Dorsey, the founder of Twitter and Square. We had Tony Hawk.
What was that like, having Jack Dorsey? Was he excited to come? Was it something he
was
all
looking
these forward to being a part of?
All these folks who have influence at that level. And this was back when Twitter, I mean now X, but when Twitter, this was 2010 or 11. So it was a pretty hot social media outlet. Mm-hmm. And we got connected to him through a friend. And then he showed up, and I don't think he was happy to be there. Honestly, he had other things, he had a lot of other people that were pulling on his time. And, you can tell when any of these people who are guests of ours at a conference, when they don't want to be there. And he was
backstage, you get that sense.
He was cordial, but it's like, let's get this over with so I can move on to the things that really matter in my life and that are going to move the needle for me. I got like board meetings coming up, and so we created this amazing intro video for him that he hadn't seen yet. And the intro video was in a tweet. But it was really well done. And so he and I are sitting on the stage. It's dark because we're showing this intro video on the screens behind us and the crowd's in the room. And he leans over and he goes, "Hey, I'd like to get a copy of that so I can use that for," I don't remember where he was going the next day. He had some other speaking thing, but a really big speaking event. I was like, "Sure, I can get you that."
And he wanted it.
And then as soon as the intro video was done, everybody started clapping. I believe there was standing ovation. And this is a Christian audience. He's not, he's thinking it's going to be a bunch of people in suits and old and they're not even, he wasn't even sure they would even know who he is. But I would say the temperature changed in terms of both his leaning in and feeling like, wow, like this feels like a room here that is warm to me. Same thing with Rainn Wilson. Same thing with Tony Hawk. I mean, same thing with Seth Godin, same thing with a lot of voices we had over the years. And I think what you said, it's the fragrance of Christ, the standard of excellence. I remember Seth Godin showing up to a Catalyst the first time, and Seth, his speaker host, he told his speaker host, I wasn't anticipating this. And I think what he was saying is the level of excellence you all are doing this event with, which we said, we don't want to compare that to the other Christian things. We want to be the best in the world, period. Why? Because that's the standard that we felt like God was calling us to. The power of excellence is that it speaks volumes to people who are looking for an exit ramp. They're looking for a reason to say, well, these Christians, again, kind of what I expected here. An average or below average level of excellence. And that was one of our core values all those years was, let's do things so well that people they won't have any reason to question our standard.
Let's talk about H3 leadership. And you wrote a book that came out not too long ago that has had a huge impact. I love the way it's broken into 3 different sections. Be humble, stay hungry, always hustle. And these are great leadership principles for everyone who's listening to this. Is there any way you can try to maybe summarize that in a 3-minute segment? I mean, because
I'll try.
It's all great stuff, but I'd love for you just to walk through, maybe give us an example of each section.
The humble, hungry, hustle framework, that was words, and it was a framework I was using, but it wasn't a book title. It was just the core values of how I like to do life, and also how I led. So humble, hungry, hustle, it has a good flow to it.
Yeah,
but
good
for
rhythm.
me, it's the big buckets that then a lot of other things go into. And I'll give you one from each bucket. When it comes to humility, I don't think we need to hash out the power of humility, but I would say this: it goes back to what I said earlier, self-awareness. To me, so much of humility comes back to, as a leader, are you self-aware? And are you leading yourself? And a big part of self-leadership is self-awareness. And most leaders don't do the hard work of self-awareness. They get to places where they have influence, and now they're protecting, now they're casting a different, a incongruency. There's a level that they're not willing to share. And I just think that self-awareness is such a powerful tool, again, for people to trust you. The other piece of humility is a sense of calling and assignment. And this is going back to clarity on your direction in life. The most humble leaders, I think, are the most self-aware leaders, but also their self-awareness, especially around their calling, now gives them contentment. And contentment, when you and I have been around leaders who walk in the room and they're not posturing, they're very confident, but they're not walking in, whether they say it or not, and looking around going, y'all all need to know who I am. Please pay attention to me. I think a lot of that comes back to that they have clarity around the direction of their life. And that takes hard work. That is a lifetime exercise to understand, okay, what's my calling? What's the direction of my life? What are the riverbanks that give me runway? And then as I go down these rivers, what is my assignment that I'm currently in? Whether it's leading Catalyst, whether it's you as a pastor at Southeast, whether it's you doing a podcast, whether it's me working on a guest ranch, doing management consulting, advising work, those are all different assignments, but they're not my calling. My calling is bigger or broader than that. And so that's a big one in humility. Let me go to hungry, unless you want to stop there.
Can I stop you before you go to hungry? And this is not going to count toward your 3 minutes. Okay. So this is
stop the clock.
We yield the time to the senator from Kentucky.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
So let's talk about, I want to dig one layer deeper on self-awareness, because I totally agree with you, but there might be somebody who's listening right now and they say, okay, well, I know I probably need to grow in self-awareness. How can I do that? Do you think that is enhanced by critique, by inviting critique, by seeking feedback? What are some of the things that would be at the top of the list for the person that says, okay, I'm not certain how self-aware I am, what's something I could do?
I think what you just said is so true. All the above, meaning, if you haven't taken all the personality tests, take as many of those as possible. And none of them are the right answer, but they're all helpful pieces of the puzzle to hopefully give you a bigger answer. You are inviting feedback. You are looking for people who know you best, who you trust, that will give you helpful feedback. A lot of people who give you feedback, it's an input of data, but it's not necessarily helpful. The people who are closest to you, who you trust the most, who work with you, who know you well, those are the people you have to actually ask them over and over. And this is what a feedback loop looks like. And here's the thing: people who work for you will not give you helpful feedback unless you invite it. Dave, you got to go a layer deeper. You got it. Yeah.
You got to go a layer deeper.
Because they're looking at you going, I love you, but I don't want to give you feedback because I might lose credibility. So you have to constantly say to somebody, listen, you're not going to get in trouble. This is going to help me. If you don't give me feedback, I'm concerned that you're not for me. So you're just finding ways to gather it. And you're also going back to self-awareness, but also leading to calling. Look back at your childhood. Your childhood will many times give you all kinds of breadcrumbs of what are the things that are true about you that you naturally like to do, would do, that you do regardless of pay, of pressure, of any kind of like parental guidance. And that's many times where you'll find the breadcrumbs of calling is in your childhood. And a lot of people miss that one. They go, wait, like,
That's good.
Oh, I remember back but Dave, when I was in first grade, day one of first grade, I'm like learning everybody's name in the class. Day two, I'm figuring out patterns of who's friends with who. Day three, I'm starting to like figure out the playground rules of engagement. Day four, I'm doing trade deals in the cafeteria. Nobody told me to do that. That was just natural wiring in me. So I was convening the kickball game. I'm gathering leaders in first grade.
I love it. I love it. My son, Sam, who's been on he's our only other non-pastor who's been on here. You and my son, Sam. So you're like a son to me, Brad.
I appreciate that.
But my son's in real estate, and he's very entrepreneurial. And it just takes me back as you were saying this. When he was in 7th grade at our little coffee shop at Southeast, they would sell these ginormous cookies, and they would sell them for like 79 cents. And so he would buy a bunch of them, and then he would take them to the Christian school the next day, and he would sell them for $2 to people.
Let's go.
And finally, the Christian school administrators called him in and said, "Hey, this you really can't do this." But it did show us his entrepreneurial spirit and his love for making a deal and business.
Absolutely.
One other thing that you talked about on the feedback and inviting that people to speak into that. I love what David Novak, great business leader, used to say. He'd say, feedback is the breakfast of champions. And
yes.
I just love that because I feel like, if we just think we've got it together and we're not teachable, and that takes humility to be teachable, then we're going to stay exactly where we are, and we're not going to keep progressing and growing and maturing, whether that's in the faith or whether that's in our calling in our career as well. Be humble. Second part, stay hungry. Also, I'm going to start the timer back now.
Start it back, baby. Curiosity. Curiosity. And it does kind of tie into even feedback. The posture of a hungry leader is that you're leaning in, and everywhere you go as a classroom, you're curious. You have a consistent and constant curiosity. Your learning quotient is always on the on mode. And I think what happens for any of us when we get into places of authority, power, leadership, title, anytime you start to rise up in an organization or rise up in influence or platform, you start to think, well, everybody's just here to learn from me. And I watch the goats. The goats walk into any room and they've got their moleskin out or their phone or their yellow pad. I don't care what device, and the posture is I'm here to learn. Like I've seen you do this, Dave. You're sitting in rooms and it doesn't matter who's sharing, you're taking notes. The mindset is I've still got more to learn. And it's not just an important piece of being a hungry leader. It's incredibly attractive to a young leader to be around somebody who looks at them and says, well, I can equally as much learn from you as you can from me. And I know I'm in charge. I know I have responsibility here, but it is such a powerful tool to connect with the next generation, which is, hey, what are you learning that I need to know? And this is such a connection point with if you're in your 50s, 60s, 70s, how do you actually engage or connect with the next generation is you take a posture of curiosity. And when you model it, it will get modeled back to you. So many of us who are old leaders, we're looking at 20-somethings and going, I can't figure out how to get them to be more curious and to want to learn. Model it for them. Show them how to do it. And they will, the mirror principle will almost always start to show fruition. So that for me is a big one, is am I willing to learn? Am I walking into any room? Am I looking around going, what can I take away from this particular circumstance or situation? And I'll give you one quick story on this one.
Let's hear it.
Well, the first time in the White House, which I'm sure you've been too. You've probably been multiple times under multiple administrations.
Well, I've been one time and you've been multiple times. What was your observation of that experience?
The sausage biscuits are on point. Your tax dollars
they fed you. No,
Yes.
You're really rubbing it in. Okay.
Yeah, it was
they didn't feed me.
It was a breakfast. It was a breakfast. The sausage biscuits are on point. I mean,
okay.
I don't know what else.
I'll make a note of that.
I don't know what else we're doing there under any administration, but your tax dollars are hard at work creating the best sausage biscuits in America. Here's the story. The first time I ever showed up, and I'm getting invited only because of the Catalyst platform. I'm in a room with a bunch of people that I admire. Many of them heroes, many of them, again, more important than me. Nobody knows who I am. I sit down at the table with a bunch of very important people. They're talking over me, around me. They don't want to talk to me. So I'm like, listen, I'm going into learning mode and curiosity mode, hungry mode. And especially the person sitting next to me. And for an hour, I am curious, asking questions, leaning in, following up. And at the end of it, and he had a lot of influence in the room. He says, "Come with me, Bart." I'm like, well, it's Brad, but that's cool. He didn't remember my name.
Hey.
It's okay, right?
You didn't correct him. You just went
I'll
with
just
it.
go with it. I'll just go with it. So he just starts walking me around the room with him. Old man grab on my arm. Hey, come with me, Hey, so-and-so, and come over here and meet this young man. This is, Barry. He gets it wrong every time. Why did I have influence with somebody I just met in an hour? It's because my posture was, I'm just interested in you. I just want to learn from you. You are the hero at the table. You're the center of the story. And instead of me trying to posture and try to figure out, how do I prove that I belong at this table of ballers in America? Because I'm not going to win at that game, but I can win at curiosity and being so interested in that person next to me that now I have so much street cred that they're willing to walk me around and introduce me to their friends.
Love it. I love it. And it's because that's attractive. That's attractive to people, because what you've just said in a subtle way, even to go back to your Jack Dorsey story, that standing ovation when he got up to speak, I guarantee you things changed in that room for him. The temperature changed. You said
Yes.
that yourself, because here's the head of Twitter. He's got a thought in mind of what these people are like, but now all of a sudden he realizes these people want to hear, they're eager to hear what I have to say.
Yes.
That's what you said to the guy next to you. Yesterday I had lunch with a powerful politician in our state. I asked him a few weeks before, I said, hey, we haven't seen each other in a while. You want to get together for lunch? And we're as different politically as night and day. But I went in there with 3 questions. We had so much fun. We're going to do it again. He, poked the bear and asked me questions. I poked him back and asked him. So there's this respect, but there's this curiosity. I came in saying, I want to learn from you. I said, there's so much that I can learn from you. And curiosity reveals that you are a learner and not a knower.
Yes.
And knowers are know-it-alls that no one wants to be around. Learners are, okay, now we're on this journey together. And guess what? Maybe I can even learn something from Dave.
Absolutely.
Here is a Jewish man asking me all these questions about why our church went to multi-site campuses. And he's asking me all these different questions about, how is it different from like a synagogue? And I'm getting to have all these conversations because of the fact that he also is a learner and wants to know those things. So awesome. Good. Let's look at the third part. Always hustle.
Hustle. And just to set everybody's expectations, this is biblical hustle. Big difference between what I would consider to be, biblical hustle built on the framework of following Jesus, and the ability for me to practice hustle with the kingdom mindset. And so it does include hard work. It does include, being willing to get things done, to execute, all those pieces. But I think for me, the differentiator with my hustle, my definition of hustle would be it's also including margin. It's collaboration. It's generosity. It's your ability to Sabbath and have a rhythm of life that is appropriate. And so the hard work and the ability to rest, I'm going to get things done, and I'm willing to work my guts out for a season while also understanding that it's not about me, and there's a generosity factor. So that's a huge component of hustle for me that's different than what a lot of people would call hustle, because hustle factor is, again, helpful, but you have to understand that it's not about you. If my hustle, if my approach to hustle is that I'm trying to hustle for others, that to me feels biblical in nature compared to I'm just out to get mine, and it's a lose-lose or win-lose situation. It's a zero-sum game, and that's not the way I approach it.
Yeah, and I like the fact that you talk about those rhythms and you talk about Sabbath, because hustle doesn't have to be going 110 miles per hour for 70 hours a week.
No.
Hustle is having those healthy rhythms while putting your best foot forward and seeking excellence and a workman who's worthy of their hire.
I would say this to some of my young friends. I love you, Rick, who's 24 or 26, but you don't need a sabbatical 6 months into your new job. We have to understand that
there's a fine line.
Yes. Everybody's so concerned about balance and about, I don't want to overwork. And I think so many of us, we're so far from the line now these days of being, are you getting close to too much hustle? And I would say a lot of people, especially those who are younger, and I love you, but a lot of people they're stopping short, and they're trying to build these frameworks of balance compared to, no, just work hard. You're smart. You'll figure it out, but you're a long ways from that line.
Yeah, boy, that's such a good word of wisdom. You are so good at pouring into younger leaders. That's always been a passion for you. You mentor. I know you do a lot of mentoring. You do that with the Ascent Leader Group, and you pour into a number of executive pastors, which I just think the novelty of, here's a guy who...
I don't know anything about executive pastoring. Yeah.
You've never worked one day on a church staff. Is that a true statement?
Never have I been on a church staff.
You are probably you're the most loved mentor out of all of those great mentors at the Ascent Leader, because of the fact that you're coming from a different vantage point and you're just sharing leadership lessons which do apply to the church time and time again.
Well, and I think what you and I do well too is we will bring wisdom, value, expertise, lessons if needed, but we also understand our role as a cohort mentor is to facilitate. My ability to facilitate and pull the gold out of everybody else, and to let the group help the group. That is I think many times that's a lost art of so many of us who are coaches or mentors. And so the power for me is that I convene and I now can start to do what I did in first grade. I'm just connecting dots.
Yeah. And you've continued to do that. I heard you talk one time on one of your podcasts about the difference between connectors and networkers. And you said that the best leaders are connectors.
Yes.
And you went through some of the dichotomy of the way networkers are or connectors are. Do you remember that?
Yeah. Yes. And it's a powerful principle. And don't get caught on the vernacular here. I'm not as concerned about, well, how do you define connector and networker? The idea is that a networker is that person that we can all think of the person. When we get around them, we don't want to be around them. It's all about them.
They walk in the room and
Yes.
people are turning their back that direction because they've got an agenda.
Well, and everybody's looking around going, who let them in? How'd they get in here? And then everybody's trying to avoid them. And let's just take the green room. The green room is the proverbial network zone or connector zone, right? And what I want it to be is a connection zone where now all of a sudden when somebody walks in who's a connector, because they're for everybody else in the room, everybody's just waiting their turn to get time with them because they know they're going to add value to them. And this is a John Maxwell principle, Dave, that like one of many that I think is so important is if you're a leader, part of your job description is to add value to people, period. Just add value. And connectors add value. They don't subtract value. Now, connectors are also, they know that there's probably a point where they might have to have an ask. They might have to ask for business. They might, be somebody who raises money. They might need to like approach somebody with a partnership opportunity. So it's not that you never cross the line, but networkers are there only for the transaction, but they'll act like they're there for the friendship. Connectors are in it for the friendship, but they occasionally will have a transaction they might need to bring up. And so for me, man, this is so important for people is just have a generosity mindset. Show up to add value to people. Don't be the person that people run from when you walk in the room. Make sure that you have a posture that says, I'm here to add value to you, and I want to do anything I can to make you better. And so that's there's a lot more on that list. But
no, I love that because John Maxwell modeled that extremely well. I heard him one time speaking to a small group of us, and he said something that stuck with me, and it was the germ or the seed for a book that I wanted to write. Instead, I ended up doing a Bible study on it. But here was the phrase that just rocked me and captivated me. He said, every day I try to do something for someone else who I do not know, who can do nothing in return to help me, and who will never have the opportunity to repay me.
Wow.
And I thought,
That's it.
I tear up thinking about it, man.
Yes.
Because the days that I do that, Brad, I cannot tell you who God brings into my life. When I just approach, okay, Lord, who are you going to bring in my path? And I wish I did it every day, but the payoff is so huge every time that I do it that you would think it would motivate me to say, okay, that's going to be just a part of my daily life. The Bible talks about honoring others above yourself. And John Maxwell said it so well that you're trying to be a generous person in every facet of your life. Sometimes we just think of generosity as giving or financial. And for those of you who are Christian leaders, it's a generous spirit. It's being generous with your time. It's having that margin that Brad talked about so that you can make certain that, yes, I do have the time when a person does, all of a sudden you say, if I can ever do anything for you, and they say, well, and all of a sudden now you're like, oh gosh, this is going to take another 6 or 7 minutes. But if I've built that margin in, I can actually be that connector versus just the networker who wants what's in it for them. You said I take notes. I take notes on you, my friend.
Ooh,
Let me tell you what
I like it.
What you said on connector and versus networker.
Let's hear it.
You said connectors are others focused, networkers are me focused. Connectors feel like, oh, there's plenty to go around. There's plenty for everybody. Networkers are, I want to win. And then you talk about how connectors are multipliers and they're collaborators. but networkers are transactional. They go into that green room or that lobby, or they go up to that person and they have one goal in mind. I want to walk away and I want to get this out of it.
Yes.
Rather than, okay, how can I go and give something? How can I make a connection here, as opposed to having those ulterior motives? You've got a lot of people who are new to Christian leadership who are listening. They might be an elder who's in a new role, has never served in that role before. It might be somebody who's a pastor, maybe a Christian leader who is now a core volunteer at their church. One of the things I've heard you talk about is the EQ, the emotional quotient. We've talked about a little bit on this podcast before with other guests. I'd love to hear you talk about just that ability to read the room and how important that is, because I think that crosses all the lines of all the different areas and roles that I talked about, and how it is that it could help each one of us become a better leader.
Yeah, I think social intelligence, relational intelligence, let's call it SQ, RQ, EQ, emotional intelligence. And by the way, you know this, and I think many of your listeners and folks who are part of this community know your IQ is pretty much set when you're a kid, but you can grow your EQ. So whoever consider themselves to be let's call it most introverted, most awkward, they have a hard time understanding people. They say the wrong thing at the wrong time. That some of that's wiring. I think you and I probably got a bit more of the quotient of EQ, but some people didn't. But you can learn how to do it. You can actually learn how to be better at it. Now, here's the question. How do I learn how to be better at it? Well, you get around people who are good at it, and you watch them and you learn from them. So you can take your EQ or your SQ or RQ and you can grow it, from a 2 out of 10 to maybe a 6 out of 10. Here's why it's so important is I think it's a differentiator today for the best leaders. I mean, the question of, well, how do I go from good to great as a leader? I think part of that is that you get really good at people skills. You have the ability to understand people. You can read the room. You understand the context of what's going on. You're able to connect dots. You're able to see patterns. And this is again, I think it's many of it, most of the time, this is learned behavior. So you've got to get around people who do it well, but you also have to be willing to be intentional about figuring out how to learn it and then practice it. Even the statement of Dave of saying, "Hey guys, as many of you know, I'm not always the best people person, or I don't always have a good handle or sense of being able to read the room effectively." Again, what do I do when I say that? I'm connecting the dots. I'm self-aware, right? And if you said to that room, "Hey, so part of what I would ask each of you is to help me get better at it, and also, when I'm not reading the room well, tell me that I'm not reading the room well." So, I think that's another helpful way to start to practice it well. But this is such a key piece. Again, like you said, whether you're a board member, you're an elder, you're a senior pastor, you're on a staff, if you start to understand the context of what's going on, the ability to help Sally and Rick figure out how to solve some kind of thing that's going on there, like these are the soft skills of leadership today that will give you street cred, but they'll also raise your level of influence. If you want to get promoted, it used to be you got promoted because you knew more. What I mean, knowledge based on just information is now available to the 16-year-old.
Oh, yeah.
So it's got to be knowledge based on skills and experience and wisdom over time that now allow you to be able to understand context of situations. That's a whole different way to approach leadership. The old days, it was if you had the right answer, because nobody else knew where to get the answer. But now I've got to be able to connect dots and have way more people skills than probably I ever have before.
Boy, that's gold, what you just shared, Brad. And it's so important. And when I think about just the unpacking of saying to your coworkers, hey, sometimes I'm not self-aware, and I'd love if you could help me with that. Now what you've done is you've taken off the table the person who would have otherwise walked away and said, he doesn't have a clue.
Exactly.
She's clueless. She has no idea. Now you've said, okay, I acknowledge that this is a weakness. This is something I'm trying to get better at. Can you help me? Now, all of a sudden, it's that collaborative. It goes right back to what we just talked about. Now it's the connector rather than the networker. You're saying, you've got something that I don't have and I need your help. I need your wisdom. You're good at this and I'm not. So help me. And
can I just say
that's
something
that
to that,
vulnerable,
Dave?
authentic piece.
One more thing on that. If you're a young leader and because this is what's happening in a lot of organizations today, churches, nonprofits, companies, is the 27-year-old is now leading a bunch of 40-somethings or 50-somethings. And the same is true for a young leader who's 27. Walk into that first meeting with that team now that's 40 and 50, and they're looking at you going, you don't know anything. You're young. I should have your job. Part of what you have to say to them is, listen, I'm here. I'm new. I love the role I get to sit in, but listen, I need you all to help me. And I know what the white elephant or the big elephant in the room is that why is this 20-something leading a bunch of us who've been around a long time? I'm very aware of that. So what I need to make sure you understand is that I'm aware of it. And the way I'm going to be successful is to have a bunch of you who know what's going on around here to actually help me be good at what I'm about to embark on. That's such a different approach than I've got to show up and have all the answers and prove to these people that I know everything.
Yeah. You know, when I took over the lead role at Southeast and followed Bob Russell, my first year was a really rough year. And it was because I didn't have that piece that you just talked about. And it was with the older adults. It was with the senior adults. And I thought that they loved me because they had loved me for 17 years as an associate. But when I got the car keys to the car and I was 16 years old, in their mind, you know, all of a sudden they pulled back and they saw a lot of changes and things that they felt uneasy about. And finally, Brad, after about 9 months, I planned an event for all of the senior adults. I had their favorite music. I had their favorite speaker. I had all these different things. And then I got up and spoke. And I just said to them, I'm sorry that I haven't led as well as I need to. And I've been driven by fear rather than faith. And I said, I'm sorry if you feel disenfranchised. And then I mean, it was this come to Jesus moment. And I'm getting emotional and it's dead silent for about 20 seconds. And I said, I can't do this without you. And I said, I need you. And I can't tell you what happened in that room, but there was this line afterwards to talk to me. And it was people apologizing for things that they had said behind my back, for the way they had submarined me or snipered me in some way. And it was them each saying, I've got your back. I'm behind you. I'll work with you. And it was one person after another. And it totally changed. And it changed, I think, because of an admission that I can't do this by myself, that I really need you. And I wish I would have learned. I wish I would have known you back then, and maybe that would have happened 2 months in instead of 9 months in. If I would have read H3, if you would have written it by then, or if we would have been friends. But
that may be the step that so many pastors and leaders need to take from listening to this conversation, is that story that you just shared. And it seems like a simple step, but it's really hard. But just one step in that direction can be the game changer that now starts to you start seeing all this now connection with people that were against you, you thought, that are now for you. And it's a hard step, but that may be the call to action right there.
But you know what the challenge, the tough part, Brad, is you want to come across as I'm a confident leader.
Yes.
And that's what I was trying to come across as, even though I've already said in this podcast that, I'm in over my head. I don't know what I'm doing, and I shared that night too. But you're trying to come across as confident. And so to say, man, I need your help, Satan is whispering in your ear, oh, you're going to be weak. You're going to be weak. And we forget all about, 2 Corinthians 12 saying, in your weakness, I'm made strong. That's when my power is the most powerful in you, is when you admit your weakness and your dependence on me. Can I dig into one quick thing with you?
Yeah.
Where did the term boomer sooner come from, and what the heck does it mean? Would you enlighten our Christian leaders of America?
I would love to. Boomer sooner is it's a cry. I mean, it doesn't mean anything. Okay, so
is boomer a noun? Is boomer a verb? What is boomer?
Well, boomer. So the Sooners were actually the people. There was an Oklahoma land run. Okay, back like in the late 1800s.
Laid on me. Come on.
Late 1800s, early 1900s. I don't remember exactly when it was, but Oklahoma was Indian territory, so that was where it was Oklahoma territory, which a lot of the people who had moved to Oklahoma were the American Indians, and then the state was started through an Oklahoma land run. Everybody had to line up basically, and you had to wait for the starter, to shoot the gun. Well, the people who squatted. Who squatted on land early, meaning they found parcels of land before the official beginning, were called the Sooners. So boomer
because
sooner.
They got there too soon.
They got there too soon. They got there early. So in essence, the mascot, the Oklahoma Sooners are basically those who were illegal in getting land before the official land run had started. But we value that. We value our people who are ambitious and have ingenuity. Now, boomer doesn't mean anything. It's just like it's an adjective of a Sooner. So it's basically
because it kind of rhymes. That's how we got it.
You got it. Yes, it's a long story. So,
well, I'm certain.
Does that help you? Does that help you? We have gone immediately into there's nobody listening. Nobody's left because you took me into a place where I get really excited, but nobody else in the world does.
I just thought it was a quick answer, but it was a great answer. I had no idea. And how enlightening to know that boomer doesn't really mean squat. Brad, this has been Rich. Thank you so much. I love you. I appreciate your friendship. Thanks for the difference that you're making with ministry leaders all across the world.
Well, thank you, Dave. Love you too. And hopefully we helped at least one person today. If we help somebody, move their influence down the line, then that's a good use of our time. So, by the way, anybody out there, if you're a podcast listener, H3 Leadership Podcast, that's my podcast. So you're already listening to Dave's. Go listen to mine as well. I'd love to have you part of the community.
Hey guys, we make certain you cut that last part. Thanks.
That's it's free.
Boy, there were so many good things. I've got 2 or 3 pages of notes that I took, and I love that section where he talked about just the people skills and learning to read the room and connect the dots. And he had a great phrase that I don't want us to miss out on. He said, be able to read patterns that you see. And I think that is all a part of leadership. He talked about how it is that leadership starts with self-leadership. If you can't lead yourself, you'll never be able to lead others. And thank you, Brad, for going through those 3 H's. Humility is the hallmark characteristic of leadership. Jesus exemplified it for us. Brad is challenging us to make certain that we strive for humility. The second H of being hungry focuses on remaining curious. I loved his story that he talked about the White House, and he's got a friend for life in that guy who sat beside him because he was curious. He kept asking questions. Now, the friend for life doesn't know Brad's name, but, you can't have everything, right? And then that third H, hustle. Hustle includes hard work. But he also pointed out that it includes margin and collaboration and a Sabbath rest. And he had a great challenge to these young leaders that he loves and that he's always pouring into when he said, hey, don't get wrapped up in, hey, when's my sabbatical going to be? Can I have a sabbatical? If you've just been there for 6 months and you're young and fresh, that's really reserved for people who have been at that church for quite some time. And I felt like his section on networking and connectors, I've heard him do it before, but man, it went to a whole nother level today. Networkers are transactional, connectors are relational and generous. And it just reminds me, for those of us who are older, we need to be looking how we can pour into those who are younger. And for those who are younger, make certain that you're open and that you're listening and that you have a teachable spirit, and God's going to do some great things. I'm going to share one more thing as well. I loved when he talked about going back to your childhood to find the breadcrumbs that are there, because that will reveal a little bit about your calling and how it is that God has wired you. I don't think I've ever heard anybody say that before, but I felt like that was so on target that I wanted to make certain that I called that to our attention. Brad is a guy who is single. He's never been married. He has no kids. He's never served as a pastor. And yet I hope every Christian leader leaned in on the things that he said, because he shared so much about teamwork and how it is that we come together by humbling ourselves and working so that the name of Christ will be the name that is famous and not our name. Our closing story today comes from out in Bruno, Nebraska. It happened years ago. A gentleman by the name of Herman Ostry, a farmer there in Bruno, had bought a piece of land and he bought a barn. And not too long after the barn had been purchased and the land there was a huge rain, and he found that down in the area where he was in the valley, it had 29 inches of water that was just sitting right there in the bottom of the barn. He half jokingly said to his family, he said, I bet if we had enough people, we could pick up that barn and we could move it to higher ground. Well, his son, Mike, was an engineer. And this was like saying sick 'em to a dog, because Mike did some calculations and he counted the number of boards, number of nails. From that, he estimated that the barn weighed around 19,000 pounds. He said, Dad, he said, if we get 344 people each to lift just 55 pounds, we'll be able to move that barn to higher ground. And so sure enough, on July 30th, back a number of years ago, they had all the townspeople come out, and all 344 on the count of 3 each lifted just 55 pounds. And in a matter of minutes, they had carried the barn. It weighed over 9 tons. They carried it over 50 yards up a hill, and they placed it there, and it never would be underwater again. What seemed impossible became possible because they all shared the load. How did they do it? Well, there were no superstars. They all did their part, and they moved in one direction. And that's the lesson for us today, is that if we're leading, if we are teachable, if we are working together as a team, and our goal is to accomplish the mission, that mission being that we want to glorify God, that we want to bring as many people to Christ as we possibly can, and that's one of the ways that we glorify Him. If that's what our mission is, and we're all working together, then it really doesn't matter what your title is. It doesn't matter if you're paid to work at the church, if you're paid in ministry, or whether you're a volunteer, whether you're bivocational. Your job as a Christ follower is to make His name famous and to make certain that you're accomplishing the task. And when we do that all together, incredible things can happen in the life of the church. Here at Focus on the Family, we always like to tell you of different resources that are available to you, and today is no exception. In fact, if you've listened to the last few episodes that we've done, we've talked about something that we're very excited about. It's a project called Truth Rising, and it's really important now because if you're listening to this when this episode dropped, it's next week that it comes out on September the 5th. And so if you're feeling overwhelmed by cultural pressure and wondering how you can speak truth in love, then this project is for you. Truth Rising is a brand new documentary film from Focus on the Family and the Colson Center. Truth Rising shares the stories of ordinary people who are standing strong in their communities, making a difference through courage, conviction, and faith. I've seen it. I loved it. I can't wait for more people to see it. I've been counting down the days until September 5th. So make certain that you click on the link in the show notes so that you can learn all about it. Well, as always, thanks for listening to Pastor. Please spread the word with others. We're in our first 6 months, and it's important for you to share that word with others. We hope to drop a brand new episode every Tuesday that will speak directly to what's going on in your life and in your ministry. It's designed always to encourage, inspire, and to challenge you, because we know leadership can be lonely, and we call this Pastor to Pastor for a reason. It's to let you know that you're not alone. So until next time, I'm Dave Stone. God bless.